Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another webinar hosted by me. Those who don't know me, I'm Augustas Kligis. I ran a couple of virtual summits for Amazon sellers. The most recent was Seller Optimization Summit, and one of the speakers during this summit was Franz Jordan, and he's my guest today. I'm just checking the tech site. I think everything is working fine. So, Franz, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Augustus, for having me again, actually.
Yes. So, those who are already in the room, please mention in the chat if you can hear us properly and see us properly, because sometimes this platform we're using has some issues. So I just want to make sure that everything is good and you can see us. Someone says, fine. Okay, so all is good. And since you can hear us, let us know where are you located. I'm located in Germany. And Franz, where are you?
In Germany as well, in Berlin. So maybe not too far away from where you are, actually.
Maybe I can shake your hand. No, we're not in the same room. No, we're like 200 kilometers away.
Oh, Julian. Wow, quite an international crowd, huh? Dubai, I see. Canada, yes.
England. Dubai, nice. I wonder, it should be similar time zone to Western Europe, New York City. It's very usual to have a European mix with North Americans, and it's nice to see someone from Middle East like Dubai. And unfortunately, Asians are probably sleeping. Ukraine, it's quite late, probably +2 hours for them. Texas. All right. So my guest is Franz Jordan. He's the co-founder and the CEO of Selix. Selix is an all-in-one tool for Amazon sellers. I think it's a very nice tool. And Franz, who you are? Can you tell a little bit your story?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I founded Selix.com now almost 3 years ago. We've actually been one of the first Amazon tools out there. So one of the first Amazon SEO tools. At the beginning, what we did is we just did simple ranking tracking. And then over time, we evolved into this all-in-one suite. So that today, we offer everything that the seller needs integrated in one software. This ranges from keyword tracking, profit analysis, PPC management, inventory management. So everything that you need as a seller on a regular basis, we have this integrated into one software. So I'm not a seller myself. I don't have a seller background. The way that I came into this is more from the technical side, right? So before having Selix, I had another startup that was focused on crawling data. And so it is actually, so while running this other company, a friend of mine who was a seller on Amazon, he came up to me and he said, "Hey, you guys are good at crawling stuff. Can you crawl the Amazon rankings for me, because I want to optimize them?" And this is actually how how we got into this. So my co-founder and I, we decided to build this new company, Selix, and then we got started on working on Selix, and now it's been 2.5 years, 3 years. We have a lot of customers in Germany, obviously, but also many customers in the US, also Asia. So quite diverse group of customers.
Someone is saying that audio is not good. All right, I think that person just chatted that he just refreshed the page and all is good. All right. Okay. So, yeah, Selix is, I think, as you said, it's known, I think, in Germany, but you are slowly going to other markets as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as a German company, we're all based in Berlin. The entire team, we're 20 people now. The entire team is based in Berlin, and I think that was one of the big management mistakes in hindsight, that we decided to stay in Germany for quite some time. So before moving to the US market, we've been in Germany for 1.5 years, maybe even 2 years, and we just recently moved into the US market. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Franz, what are you gonna share today with us?
So today I want to talk about PPC, so Amazon sponsored products. The thing is that I think that most of the parts of Amazon are pretty well understood by most sellers today, right? How to do keyword research, how to do copy optimization, this kind of stuff. This is all well understood, but I still see that, you know, there are so many questions out there with regard to PPC that, you know, I think there needs to be, you know, there need a lot of education is needed in that area. So, you know, I decided to do a webinar today on sponsored products, and the goal essentially is to give one clear strategy, you know, one campaign structure that everyone can use, that is easy enough to use and to handle, but at the same time sophisticated enough so that you know, you actually get most of the power out of it, right?
Mm-hmm. And so everyone who came to this webinar, I think I understood that they will want to learn the basics of PPC. And guys and girls, please write in the chat if you're already running PPC campaigns, and if not, also write that you are not running, so we will know a little bit if how knowledgeable you are. Maybe you are just afraid to start these things. I personally, for me, anything which is about PPC or advertising or Facebook ads, it's a forest, and when I do something, I don't know what I'm doing. So people are saying that they are running PPC ads. Some people, they don't run. So I think you will get some good takeaways from Franz's presentation. And
cool. Yeah, it looks like most people are kind of at the beginning, so that's kind of perfect. So the idea is that, you know, I expect you to know some basics. So I expect you to know what an auto campaign is, what a manual campaign is, you know, what the most important terms are, like ACOS, you know, this kind of stuff I would expect you guys to know. But other than that, you know, I think we will start at the beginning.
Leta says that she tried to run, or he tried to run ads, but had no results. Someone doesn't know how much to spend. And Michael or Michael is asking if you will give us any takeaways where people, for the people who don't want to sign for Selix.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the webinar. So I have two parts prepared essentially. The first part is going to be slides where we're just gonna, you know, I'm gonna run through the through the strategy, and then if you want to leave afterwards, it's perfectly fine. You can all implement this by yourself. Of course, you know, at the end, I'd like to show how Selix can make it easier for you to implement this strategy. But it's not mandatory. So you can do everything that say in the webinar can be done on a manual basis.
Sure. So the main part of the presentation will be for everyone. All right. So I think we're ready to jump into the slides.
Okay, cool. So if there are any questions, are you?
Yeah. So maybe if there are questions, everyone, please just write your questions in the chat. I will take notes of all the questions. I saw already when we connected to the webinar, there was a question from Zisha, and I will collect the questions after the presentation. In case I will spot a question related to what Franz is saying right now, I might jump and interrupt Franz as well. But usually it's quite hard to catch all the questions during the presentation. So it's better just to keep notes and for later.
I see a question. What's the perfect ACOS? I'll have an answer to that. That's good. Okay, cool. Yeah, so let's get started. I hope you can all see the slides. Like I said, the first part is going to be slides where I'm just going to show the basic strategy, so the concept that I have in mind here. Now, before we get started with PPC, I just want to make sure I just want to mention this very briefly. Before you get started with PPC, you really need to make sure that your listing is actually optimized, right? So that all your bullet points are in place, that your images are optimized, your title is optimized, all of that. You know, you really need to make sure that this is actually done before, because otherwise you will lose a lot of money with PPC if your listing is not optimized. So I think that, if you don't have an optimized listing or don't know how this works, then just Google it. I think there's a lot of information out there on how to optimize your listing. No need to go into that too much. right? So if you start with PPC, I think the first step, and I see this very often, that people jump this step, right, is to think about what the actual goal is, right? So what's the goal? Why are you running sponsored products? And way too often when I ask sellers, so what's your goal with PPC? They don't have a clear answer. And I think that if you look at the goals that you can have on sponsored products, essentially they are very easy, right? Because there are two main goals that you can have on sponsored products. So one is that you actually maximize your profits, right? So this is essentially the more common strategy, right? So the goal is to get as much profit out of it as you can, right? And the second strategy is to maximize your sales. So maximize the units that you're selling on through sponsored products. So may this be to increase your ranking. It could also be to get rid of some stock that you don't need any longer. But essentially, most of the strategies can be summarized under those two goals, right? So either you maximize for profit or you maximize for sales, right? There is a few minor goals apart from this, but those are the two main goals. And now the reason this is important to know is because depending on what goal you have, you will need to calculate a different ACOS, which will allow you to track the performance of your campaigns. So the question that I hear a lot is the question that Chris also had is, what's a good ACOS, right? And people always hope that I can give a number like 5% or 10% or 20%. But the truth is that it really depends first on your goal, and second on the cost structure that you have, right? So let me make this a bit more clear. So it looks very technical here. Don't get don't get afraid of it. So let's assume that this bar here, this column here, is summarizing cost structure, right? So let's say that you're selling your product, and 25% of the sale price is actually going to Amazon fees, right? So in FBA fees and sponsored products. FBA fees and Amazon fees. You have 43% in production and logistic costs, right? So freight costs for getting the product to the warehouse, production costs, how much you pay for the units, and then you have 10% overhead costs that you allocate to this product. So this is a very simple calculation. If you do it in greater detail, you will come up with some other costs as well. But bottom line is that at the end of all those costs, you still have 22% in profit margin, right? So that's the margin that you have after deducting all the different costs that you have. And this is for one single product. Now note that those 22%, this is actually the profit that you have before incorporating any ad spend, right? So if you don't run any campaigns, any sponsored products campaigns, and you just sell one product organically on Amazon, this 22% is actually your profit margin, right? And now, based on this profit margin, you will actually want to calculate two different types of ACOS or ACOS. So the first one is the break-even ACOS. And the break-even ACOS is very simple to calculate because it's essentially the profit margin itself. So if you have a 22% profit margin, the break-even ACOS will be 22% as well. And the break-even ACOS means that if your actual ACOS that you have with the campaign is smaller than your break-even ACOS, right? So if you have an actual ACOS of 20% and the break-even ACOS is 22%, that means that you're actually making money, right? Because you're spending less on ads that you actually have in profit margin, right? So this is the first very important threshold: is calculate your profit margin, and then make sure that your actual ACOS is lower than the break-even ACOS. If your actual ACOS is higher than the break-even ACOS, so let's say you run a campaign and you have an ACOS of 40% while your break-even ACOS is 22%, then you're actually losing money with every sale that you make, right? So that's really important to understand that, break-even ACOS, this is the number one metric that you should calculate. Now, this is if you want to maximize sales, right? If you want to maximize the units you sell without looking at profits, then this is the number that you should optimize for. So your ACOS should be as close as possible to this break-even ACOS. Now, if you want to maximize for profits, then I suggest that you calculate the so-called target ACOS. And the target ACOS is nothing else than starting from the break-even ACOS, you determine how much target profit margin you want to make, right? So let's say that you decide you want to make at least 10% in profit margin from each sale that you have in sponsored products. That leaves you a 12% to invest into sponsored products, right? So if that means that your target ACOS will be 12%. And again, if you manage to have an actual ACOS that is lower than 12%, lower than your target ACOS, that will mean that you will actually make at least this 10% profit margin that you're aiming for. Okay, so this is those two numbers, the break-even ACOS and the target ACOS. Those are very important numbers, and ideally you should know both, right? You should know that, hey, the break-even ACOS, this is when you start to make profits, and the target ACOS, this is when you start to make your target margin on sponsored products. Okay, so those two are really important, and we'll get back to them later in the presentation. So that's to get started. How to determine the great ACOS. So if Chris is asking what's a great ACOS, I can tell you that it really depends on what you're aiming for, and it depends on your cost structure. And it's hard to tell the average. There are some categories where a good ACOS is maybe 20%, but there are some other categories where a good ACOS is maybe 5%. The thing that I can tell you for sure is that an ACOS of 100% or more is certainly not good, because then for sure you're losing money, right? So starting from 50, 60%, I think it becomes very, very difficult to be profitable. Okay, so that's the starting point. So think about what you want to do, and then based on this, calculate your target margin, your target ACOS or your break-even ACOS, and then you can adjust your campaign starting from here. So I see there's some questions coming. I don't know, Augustus, shall we take questions as they come in, or do we make a session afterwards?
We can try some questions. Let's see. Someone was saying, Michael was asking, other than ACOS, what metric do you think is important to consider? CTR, impressions, orders, etc. etc.
Yeah. So it depends on the strategy that you follow. I think that certainly impressions are very important, especially to get an understanding of how big the search volume is. But that depends. I really think the most important metric is essentially the ACOS, or the profit that you make, combined with the conversion rate, and especially comparing the PPC conversion rate with the organic conversion rate. But we'll get into this later in the presentation.
Mm-hmm. What else do we have? Single keyword grouping, multiple keyword grouping. I think it's not related to this slide.
So I see there's a question from Chris again. Break-even ACOS 22% will be the margin for the PPC sale, but if you sell a lot via PPC, your organic sales will go up. For organic sales, you do not give any cent for PPC. That's true. So you have kind of a benefit of, if you make a lot of sales through sponsored products, you will also boost your organic rankings. So this effect is not calculated here into the target ACOS. If you do want to incorporate this into your calculation, what you can do is you just add another few percent to the break-even ACOS. So you estimate how much extra sales you will generate in organic products, and then you can calculate this, and then your target ACOS will not be 22%, but then will be maybe 30%. Right, mm-hmm. So that's a way to handle this. Now, another question I see: how do you calculate ACOS when you change the price regularly? So let's say 19.99 this week, 19.50.99 next week. So this is certainly an interesting question. The only thing you could do is just calculate the profit, calculate the target ACOS on a regular basis. So whenever you adjust it, you would need to recalculate the target ACOS. The other way you can do it, if you use any tools, then those tools might be able to show you the adjusted profit, right? So, that's it. So I suggest we just continue. And if you have questions, just drop them in, and we'll stop from time to time. Is that okay?
Yes. All right. Sure.
Okay. Cool. So once you've defined your target, the next step then is to find the right campaign structure. And I think a lot of questions that I hear are always like, what's the perfect structure? And maybe a bit disappointing answer is that there is no perfect campaign structure with sponsored products. Okay, there are a ton of different strategies how you can set up your campaigns, and all of them might work. I think what's important to understand is that the campaign structure, there's really a trade-off between perfection on one side and scalability and low management effort on the other side. So if you don't want to spend any time optimizing your campaigns, if you don't want to think about your campaigns at all, and you want to make it very scalable so that it works with not just one product, but also 20 or 100 or 2,000 products, then the easiest thing you can do is just set up automatic campaigns, right? Amazon will take care of everything for you. You will need to check in here and there to adjust the budget and maybe adjust the bids here and there. But essentially, you don't need to invest any time into this, right? So that would be a very scalable and low management structure. But at the same time, it will also be not the most profitable one, right? Because you cannot make any individual adjustments to bids. You cannot use the match type. So that's kind of the downside of it. On the other side, if you go to the other extreme, you will have the perfect campaign, right? And the perfect campaign essentially consists of a campaign that only has exact keywords, right? So keywords with the match type exact, and it consists of all possible keywords that are relevant to this product. Okay. And here the difficulty is that obviously, there could be many, like thousands or even tens of thousands of keywords that are relevant to this product. So just for one product, you would have an ad group with tens of thousands of keywords, and you would need to manage bids for those tens of thousands of keywords, right? So this gives you the most control of what's happening, and you can very much fine tune the bids to your product. But the disadvantage is that obviously it's very hard to manage bids for tens of thousands of keywords just for one product. So if you add 10 or 100 or 1,000 products, then it becomes essentially unmanageable, right? So the difficulty is kind of to make this trade-off here. And so what I see a lot in the space is that, there is a tendency to overcomplicate this entire sponsored product thing, right? And so the goal that we have is today in this presentation is kind of show a structure that is somewhere here, right? That is that has the benefits of having a scalable and yet a low management, or a structure that requires little management, but at the same time also offers the advantages of having exact campaigns and using different match types and different ad groups, right? So that's the goal that we have today. Now the way that it works, so the campaign structure that we suggest, that we find is very good here at Celix, is to have two campaigns with three different ad groups, right? So you have one auto campaign, and you have in this auto campaign, you have one ad group. And then at the same time, you have one manual campaign. And in this manual campaign, you have two different ad groups. One ad group focused on broad keywords and one ad group focused on exact keywords. Okay, so that's the general structure, how we feel you can both keep it simple and at the same time, get the benefits of the different elements combined into one. And then what you would do on a regular basis when you manage the campaigns is you would move search terms from the auto campaign into your broad campaign, and then from your broad campaign into the exact ad group. And you would also add search terms to negative from the auto and from the broad campaign, right? So that's the general structure that we suggest. I hope this slide doesn't look too crazy. So I think it's rather simple.
Franz, I have a question. So do you suggest to have 2 campaigns set up for auto and manual?
Yeah, so 1 for auto and 1 for manual for each ASIN.
Okay.
Right?
It's interesting because I heard other suggestions that one ASIN should have, I think, 1 campaign, and then you go into the tree deeper. But
so I think that the disadvantage if you only have 1 campaign is that it's either an auto campaign or a manual campaign, because a campaign cannot be both. And I think that auto campaigns have some advantages, and manual campaigns also have some advantages, right? And so by setting up both types of campaigns, you actually combine the advantages of those 2 types, right?
Mm-hmm. And so, Omar is asking, at the same time or one at a time you should run these campaigns?
No, it's really at the same time. So when you get started, you set up an auto campaign, and 5 minutes later you set up a manual campaign.
All right. So answer is gotten. Okay.
So that's the general structure that we suggest. Again, there are millions and millions of structures that you can use, but we put a lot of energy into thinking about and into coming up with a structure that is easy to manage and at the same time gives you all the benefits that are available, right? And so what I want to do in the presentation, in the first part, I want to focus on how to set up those campaigns, right? So those auto campaigns and those manual campaigns. And then in the second part of the presentation, we're going to focus on how to optimize those campaigns on a continuous basis, right? So that's the general structure. So let's get started with setting up the campaigns, right? So let's assume you have a product on Amazon that is optimized, that is launched, right? And so now you want to get started with sponsored products. So the first thing you should do is create this auto campaign, right? So this is this part here on the left side, the orange part. So setting up an auto campaign is actually very easy. Okay, so you just go to Seller Central, you click on advertising, and then you create the campaign. The goal of this auto campaign is actually to find new keywords for you, right? So the goal is not to make any profit. It happens that you make profit, but that's not the ultimate goal. The goal is really to find new and profitable keywords. What I suggest in terms of naming is that you add auto to the campaign name. You can see here, I tried to add this here in the screenshot. So it says demo and in brackets it says auto. The advantage is that, if you add the auto into campaign name, it will make it a lot easier for you to keep an overview of what's actually an auto campaign and what's a manual campaign. Now, in terms of budget, I suggest that, that you use just $10 or €10 per month. It's quite honestly, I don't think that the budget is really important. The budget, I always consider the budget to be like an airbag. Okay, so you should only need this in case of an accident. So the reason that the budget shouldn't be relevant is this: if you have a profitable campaign, there is no need to set any budget. There is no need. There's no reason why you should stop spending on ads after $10 if you could still, run profitable campaigns spending $20, $30, or $40, right? So if it's profitable, you don't need any budget because you want to spend as much as you can while you're still profitable. Now, if it's not profitable, the budget is not your main concern. So the main concern is then to get it profitable. Right. So in this case, the budget is really just, like I said, it's an airbag. So if you let's say you make a typo and suddenly instead of bidding 50 cents, you bid $50, right? This is where you want to make sure that your budget, you don't get robbed, right, from Amazon. But it's really just the budget shouldn't be a limiting factor. Okay. So in terms of products, like I said, I suggest that you use 1 ASIN per campaign. I also saw that there are some questions coming about child ASINs. And here again, it really depends on how many child ASINs you have. So if you are in apparel, for instance, and you have many different product sizes and colors, then I suggest that you group those child ASINs into one campaign. If you only have few child asins, and the differences between the asins are significant, then I suggest you use them as two different campaigns, right? And now the last thing you should you need to set is the default bid, right? So you have a suggested, and this again I think is very easy. So you have a suggested bid when you're in the campaign manager. Amazon will give you a suggested bid for the auto campaign, right? And so my suggestion is that you just use this suggested bid, but that you deduct 30 to 40% from the suggested bid if you make sure that you have the most relevant keywords in your manual campaigns. And we'll get to this step later, but the key idea is this. Since you want to use the auto campaign to find new keywords, if you have researched all the most relevant keywords, so the keywords that get a lot of traffic, and have put them into your manual campaign already, the auto campaign will mainly find long tail keywords for you. And in order to find those long tail keywords, you don't need to bid very aggressively, which is why you can deduct 30 to 40% from the suggested bid, right? That's the idea that we give, so you can save a bit of money and don't spend too much on irrelevant search terms, right? And that's essentially it. So setting up an auto campaign, as I said, is really easy. So let's continue with the manual campaigns, right? So the manual campaigns, and like I suggest, consist of two different ad groups. So one ad group for broad keywords and the other one for exact keywords. And now before we get started and look into this, I just want to make sure very quickly that everyone understands the difference between the three match types there on Amazon, right? So on Amazon, there are three match types. They're called broad, phrase, and exact. Those are the three match types. And the main difference, or essentially the only difference between the match types, is that the number of, or essentially is how wide of a net Amazon is casting, right? So if you use broad, Amazon will show your ad for many search terms that are related to the keyword that you're actually bidding on. If you use exact, it will actually, the ad will only be displayed for the search term that you're actually bidding on, right? So I think this gets more clear if I use an example. So let's say that you're selling an apple slicer, and with that apple slicer, you are bidding on the keyword apple slicer, right? Which makes a lot of sense since it's an apple slicer, right? So you have an apple slicer, you bid on the keyword apple slicer. Now, if you set this keyword to broad, what will happen is that Amazon will show your ad for all those keywords that you see here, right? So apple slicer and Cora, apple Cora slicer, apple Cora, apple peeler, apple cutter, fruit slicer, fruit cutter, apple spiral slicer, thin apple slicer, mango slicer, potato slicer, and French fry cutter, right? So you will actually get a long list of search terms. And as you can see, some of them are relevant for my apple slicer. So those are the ones in greens, but some of them are not relevant, right? So apple spiral slicer is not relevant because I don't have a spiral slicer. Thin apple slicer is not relevant because mine is not thin, right? Mango slicer is not relevant because it's not for mangoes. Potato is not relevant because it's not for potatoes, and French fry again is not relevant because it's not made for French fries, right? So Amazon will present the ad to a very wide set of search terms if you use broad, right? If you use phrase, it will still show it to a larger number, but it won't show it to synonyms, right? So mainly it will show it to apple slicer and Cora, apple Cora and slicer, apple spiral slicer, thin apple slicer. So all of those words contain apple slicer, which is the original keywords that we're bidding on, right? So the main difference here between broad and phrase is really essentially in the synonyms. There are some smaller changes as well, but I think the main difference here is that, Amazon will show you ad for fruit slicer and fruit cutter. So those are really synonyms to apple slicer. Whereas in phrase, it will only show it to apple slicer, words that contain apple slicer, right? And then finally, Yeah.
Sorry, Elizabeth is asking why fruits cutter is inside the first column, because it doesn't contain word apple and doesn't contain slicer.
Yeah, so it's it really depends on the algorithm at Amazon. So essentially, the idea of broad is that it really goes into also into synonyms, right? So fruit slicer, if Amazon identifies that fruit slicer is a synonym of apple slicer, it will likely also show it there. Amazon is not very strong with synonyms, so it's not as strong as it works with Google AdWords. But the idea eventually is that it goes very broad. Okay, does that make sense?
I guess so. So yeah, for Elizabeth, these columns, these phrases is not what you are putting in the back end, but this is what Amazon will try to match to your main keyword apple slicer. I understand. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. And so and so finally, if you go to exact and you're bidding on apple slicer, so remember, we're always bidding on apple slicer. That's the only keyword that we're bidding on, but we only change the match type, right? And so if we have an exact, if we're bidding on apple slicer with exact, then our ad will only appear with apple slicer. Okay. And so now the advantage, so, all match types have advantages and disadvantages, right? So the advantages of the broad match type is that you actually, you're bidding on many keywords that you probably didn't think about, right? So you're bidding on other keywords like apple corer, apple peeler, apple cutter. Those are relevant keywords, right? But you didn't think about them, so it's good that by setting it to broad, Amazon is actually bidding on them. Now, the disadvantage of this broad approach is that you're also bidding on a lot of keywords that are actually not so relevant to your keywords and where you certainly to your product, so where you will certainly lose some money, right? And so if you go from broad to phrase, this becomes less, so you will get less keywords that are relevant, but also less keywords that are not relevant. And finally, if you go to exact, you will only get the one that you have. The advantage of exact, however, is that you can make a very precise bid, right? So you can bid exactly the amount that you want to have on apple slicer, because you know that you're not wasting any money, right? So if, let's say, you bid $1 for apple slicer on broad, you will lose all the money that you spend here on those red keywords, right? Because they're not relevant. So typically you will not bid as much on broad as you would bid on exact, because for exact you're not losing any money on wasted keywords. Whereas if you go on broad, there are always going to be some keywords where you're losing money, so you don't want to bid as much, right? So the key insight here is that the more precise the match type gets, the less waste you have, but also the less keywords you're actually bidding on, right? So those are kind of the pros and the cons. Okay, and so the idea is that you wanna get the benefits of the broad match type, and you also want to get the benefit of the exact match type. So this is why our recommendation is to actually combine those two into different ad groups. Now, some people say were asking, I saw this, why we're not using phrase. Well, the main reason is that we don't see too much of a difference between broad and phrase, to be honest. So I think that and the differences that I made here, those are actually just some examples to make it very clear. But in reality, the differences between broad and phrase are not too big, which is why we decided, for the sake of simplicity, to leave phrase out of it. And just go with broad and exact. Now, obviously, again, if you think about the spectrum that we had at the beginning, where I said, you need to decide whether you want to go very precise, or whether you want to precise and complex, or whether you want to keep it very simple. If you add phrase to it, and you can, essentially you can add a phrase ad group here as well. That works, but it makes it more complicated to handle. That's the main reason. So we don't feel like it's worth it to have. The extra complexity that you get from using phrase is not worth the benefit of using it. That's how we feel, right? But of course, you can use it. So those are the differences between the different match types. I hope this makes sense, right? On the move on and see when we go to and create the exact match group, the exact ad group, right? So if we want to create the exact ad group, so we need to create a manual campaign. The goal of this ad group is to generate profit. So again, the budget, like I said before, $10 should be fine. In terms of naming, I suggest that you add manual to the campaign name and exact to the ad group name, so that you always, understand, where you actually are. Again, products, I think that, you should set it to 1 ASIN per campaign. The default bid, you should calculate the default bid. That's we look at this on the second slide. And then finally, you also need to choose the keywords. And here we suggest that you use tools like Sonar to come up with the top 20 to 50 keywords to actually find the most relevant keywords, right? So the easy part is everything that's up here, right? So up until product, that's very easy. The part that's a bit more complicated is the default bid and the keywords, which is why we're looking into this right now. So how do you set the default bid for an auto campaign? That's the question. And so I have this formula here. Don't worry. It's not as complicated as it might look on the first glance. So what we suggest is that you take the target ACOS that you have set or that you've calculated in the first step, you multiply this by the price, and then finally you multiply this by the organic conversion rate. And then eventually you add 20 to 30%, right? So that's the general idea. And let me explain why we think that this makes sense for setting the default bid. So by multiplying the target ACOS with the price, you know how much in terms of dollars you can spend on sponsored products to generate one sale. Okay? So if we look at the example down here, so if we have a target ACOS of 10% and the product is selling for $50 per unit, we know that we have a total of $5 that we can spend on sponsored products per sale that we generate. Okay? So that's the amount that we have. So if we generate one sale for every $5 that we spend on ads, then we're happy, right? Because we've reached our target ACOS. Okay. And then we suggest to multiply this by the organic conversion rate. So this is the conversion rate of the product that you have, because this essentially shows you how much clicks are needed to generate this one sale. Okay. So if we have an organic conversion rate of 5%, we know that on average for every 20 clicks that we get, we will generate one sale. Okay. And then we combine this, and essentially that means that if we have $5 that we can spend on PPC to still be profitable, and we need 20 clicks to generate one sale, that means that on total we have 25 cents per click that we can spend to achieve our target ACOS. Is that clear? So I'll see if I'll check for the questions, for the comments, but that's the general idea, right? So you calculate, you just assume, the assumption behind this is that your sponsored products will perform on average at the same rate than your organic conversion rate. Okay. And so assuming that you have the same performance, how much can you actually spend per click to actually generate a profit? Right? So that's a general idea. Now, the thing is that the number that you get out of here, the number that you get from this calculation, so those 25 cents here, right? This is actually the cost per click that you have, right? So the amount that you're actually paying. And now what's important to understand is that the amount that you're paying is not the amount that you're bidding, right? So the bid can be 50 cents, but what you actually pay is only 40 cents, for instance, right? And so what we see on average, it's like 30%. The bid can be the CPC is on average 30% lower than the actual bid, which is why we suggest that you actually bid an extra 30%. So instead of bidding 25 cents, you will actually bid 32 cents to then eventually end up with a 25-cent cost per click. Okay, is that
Elizabeth says it's not clear, but I think it's just you need to maybe someone who needs to study this formula, they can just watch the replay and and put their own numbers.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the formula per se is quite easy, right? What's important is that that you get the idea, right? And so if Toby's asking, what do you mean by 30%? I just mean that you from this result that you get here, right? So you get those 25 cents as a result of this calculation, and then to this result you just add another 20 to 30%, right? So from 25 cents, 30% would be 7.5 cents, right? So you get from 7.25 to 32 cents. Is that?
Yeah, please.
So I hope this answers the question.
Toby, yeah, let us know if it answered the question. Also, Chris is asking where it disappeared. How to get organic CPR?
So the organic conversion rate, you can find this in Seller Central. If you go to the report section, so business reports, there you can download it, and there you can actually calculate the conversion rate.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I think we can move on. The questions are coming on in, so we will attend them after the presentation.
Yeah, so I hope that I'm just going to answer some questions in the presentation per se, but if not, we're going to have a session at the end, right? So that's the that's I think the fundamental idea is really important. Is that you just you assume that your ads are just going to perform like your organic performance, and so based on this assumption, you can calculate how much you actually can spend on clicks, right? And so you've set your target bid, and then finally, I think what's important also when you create this manual campaign is that you actually set up the first, I always say 20 to 50 keywords, right? So those keywords are those should be the most important keywords for your product. So when you get started, there is no need to wait for bidding for the most important product. So if you sell an apple slicer, you should start bidding on apple slicer right away from the first day on the exact campaign. There's no need to wait, right? And so the suggestion that we have is to use Sonar. Sonar is our keyword research tool, which is free actually. So this is, I think it's Augustus, you okay if I show it? So yes, Sonar is really it's 100% free. So you can just use it to research keywords. It works very easy. So you just enter the keyword that you want to have, for instance, apple slicer, and then it will give you a list of related keywords that are relevant. So you can see apple slicer and Cora, apple slicer, apple Cora slicer, and so on. And so what's important is you actually also have a search volume here, so you can use it to prioritize it and actually get the most important keywords out of it. So the suggestions that I typically give is start with the most important 20 to 50 keywords from day one, right? And you can use Sonar to research those keywords. Obviously, you can also use other methods to come up with the keywords. But I think like honestly, we get very positive feedback, and like I said, it's entirely free. So I'm not trying to put any commercial here. It's just I think a very convenient tool. You can also do a reverse ASIN search. So you can also click on one product, and it will show you all the keywords that this product's ranking for. And there again, you'll have a list of all those keywords. Okay, and then
Mark is asking, how do you get the Amazon search volume?
So how we get the Amazon search volume? I mean,
as a seller, how to get? Maybe he means.
Well, I don't know. I think he's probably referring to the search volume here in Sonar. So we found a way to rank the keywords based on how popular they are on Amazon. So we're not using any external data. We only use information from Amazon. So obviously I can't go into details here because it's kind of our secret sauce. But it's essentially it's ranking the keywords by popularity on Amazon. Okay. So that's the Sonar part. Also, yeah, maybe because there was a question at the beginning, if I recall, if it works internationally. So yes, it does work internationally. So you can choose the different countries here: Spain, Italy, France, Germany. So it works across all countries. Okay, cool. So that's what I suggest for setting up the campaigns, right? The exact campaign. Now for the broad ad group, I suggest to essentially use the exact same process, right? So again, you start with a 10% bid, a $10 bid. In terms of naming, you add manual to the campaign, and you have broad to the ad group. You use one ASIN per campaign. Now, for the default bid, my suggestion is that you actually use the same default bid as the exact ad, and you just deduct 20 to 30% from what you bid in the exact ad group, right? And the reason behind it is that you typically want to bid less on the broad than you want to bid on the exact. So I suggest you just deduct the 20 to 30% from the exact ad group. And now, with regard to keywords, my suggestion is that you use the exact same keywords that you researched for the exact ad group, and you add those keywords to the broad campaign. And that's a bit counterintuitive maybe. You also add them as negative exact to the same ad group. Okay, so you add them at the same time as keyword, but at the same time you also add them as negative exact keyword. Okay. So it might be a bit counterintuitive, but the reason is actually fairly simple. So if you do have those two ad groups, right? So you have your exact ad group where you're bidding on Apple Slicer, and you have your broad ad group where you're also bidding on Apple Slicer. You don't want to bid again on the exact search term Apple Slicer, but you only want to get those search terms that you're not bidding on the exact ad group, right? Which is why the idea is that you add Apple Slicer as a keyword to your broad campaign. This will allow you to bid on all those search terms here. But at the same time, you also add it as a negative exact search term here to the broad ad group to avoid that you bid both in the broad ad group and also on the exact ad group. Okay. So I hope this is not too confusing, but that's the thing. So Chris is asking whether it's exact negative or phrase negative. So the idea is that you use it as exact, right? Exact negative. Okay, so I hope this makes sense, right? So that's basically it, right? So you have so that's essentially the setup, right? So again, the setup consists of creating an auto campaign. As we saw, this is very easy. And then you have to create a manual campaign. This is a bit more complicated because you need to research the keywords, and you also need to add the to determine the default bid. But that's about it. Yeah. Okay, so that's the setup. I hope this is clear so far. I know that PPC is a very complicated topic. I try to make it as easy as possible. So I hope this is working. So David is asking, why would you bid on French fry cutter? Well, it's not me that's bidding on French fry cutter. Is Amazon that's doing it themselves, right? So if you bid on Apple Slicer and you select broad, then Amazon will just spray it across different search terms, and then it might happen that they also bid on French fry cutter, right? So that's the reason that we actually use exact to avoid this kind of stuff.
And Michael says, I have been wasting money by not adding negative exacts to my broads. Thanks for the tip. So Michael was giving a lot of compliments to you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So thanks, Michael. I think those are kind of the easy things that can save you a lot of money. But and not many times are forgotten. So I suggest that you add them. So that's for a setup, right? So once the campaigns are set up, the next task then is to manage the campaigns on an ongoing basis, right? And so if we look at this structure here again, the first thing that you want to do is you want to, in the auto campaign, right? what you do in the auto campaign on a regular basis is first you move some search terms from the auto campaign to negative, so those who are not performing, and you also move those search terms who are performing from the auto ad group into the broad ad group. Okay, so those are the things that you need to do on an ongoing basis. Okay, so what does it mean exactly? Essentially, in the auto campaign, you can do three things, right? So first thing you can do is you can move search terms to negative exact, okay? And you should do this if the search term does not match your product, right? So if you run an auto campaign and you're actually selling an apple slicer and you see that Amazon is bidding on French fry cutter, then you should move French fry cutter to negative. All right, because French fry cutter doesn't make any sense for your apple slicer, so you don't want to bid on them. Okay, so if you see that Amazon is going crazy and is bidding on search terms that are not relevant in the auto campaign, then just put those search terms to negative. Okay, no matter, and you don't need to wait for a certain number of clicks or a certain number of impressions or something. If you see the search term is not relevant to your product, put it to negative. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing you should, or the second reason why you should move search terms to negative is if a search term does not lead to any sale after a certain number of clicks, right? So after X number of clicks, you should move it to negative if it does not generate any sales. Okay, and we'll get to the calculation of X on the next slide. Okay, because I know. Because I know that this is probably the next question, right? So this is the first thing that you should do, okay? You should, on a regular basis, and I suggest you do this even once a week or maybe twice every second week, right? You go into your auto campaign and you go through the search terms and you move all the negative search terms, all the search terms that don't match or that don't generate any sales to negative, okay? The second thing that you should do, again, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, is you should move the search terms to broad if the search terms do generate sales within a certain number of clicks, okay? So those that don't generate sales, move them to negative, and those that do generate sales, move them to the broad campaign. And again, if you move this to the broad campaign, make sure to add them again as negative exact in the auto campaign, okay? So that the same idea that I just explained before, that you don't have the same search term in different ad groups. Okay, you only want to have one search term in one specific ad group. So you take it out of the auto campaign, put it to negative there, and add it to broad, right? And then lastly, the third thing that you can do is you can leave search terms in auto campaigns, essentially not touch them, if the search term has very little search volume, but is still relevant to your product. Okay. So essentially, to summarize this, move the non-performing search terms to negative, move the performing search terms to broad, and leave the ones that are not having any performance in some way to adjust in the auto campaign. Just leave it running. Okay. So those are the three things that I suggest. Now the question here is, what's the X, right? So how long should you wait before you move a search term to negative or to broad? Okay. And again, there is no final answer to say wait for 10 clicks or wait for 50 clicks or wait for 100 clicks or 1,000 clicks. Okay. That's there in my mind, there is no such number, no magic number that you can use, but I can give you a reference point. Okay. And so I think you should wait at least, okay, so this is the minimum, for 100 divided by the organic conversion rate. Okay. So let's assume that you have an organic conversion rate of 10%, then you should wait at least for 10 clicks before you put it to negative. Okay. Because if you have 100 divided by your organic conversion rate, that's 10. 100 divided by 10 is 10, right? If you have an organic conversion rate of 20, that would mean 100 divided by 20, so you would need to wait for 5 clicks. And if you have an organic conversion rate of 5, then you would want to wait for 100 divided by 5, that's 20, so 20 clicks. Okay, so that's the minimum that you should wait. And the reason why you should wait at least for this number of clicks is that this is actually the performance that you would expect on average from your organic conversion rate. Okay. So if you have an organic conversion rate of 10%, you should wait at least for 10 clicks and we'll see if you get one sale out of those 10 clicks to get this conversion rate. Okay. So that's the minimum. So give it a fair chance to show whether it can beat your organic conversion rate or not. And then the maximum to me, and this is kind of a rule of thumb, is you should take the product price times 2 divided by the actual cost per click. Okay. And so the product price, so let's assume that, the product price is setting for $20, you multiply it by 2, so you have $40, and then you divide it by the average cost per click. Okay, so that would mean that if your average cost per click is 50 cents, and you have $40 that you can invest, that would mean 80 clicks. Okay, so you would have something between 10 to 80 clicks, and somewhere in between you would put it to negative. Now, the reason I think that the product price times 2 is kind of the upper limit, that essentially means that, you're willing to spend twice the product price to test if this search term is actually performing, right? So if you sell it for 20, you would be willing to spend $40 per keyword to find out whether the search term is working. This is a lot of money. And this is a lot of money, especially if you take into account that you have, you don't have just one keyword, you have, tens or maybe hundreds of keywords. And if you spend $40 per keyword to find out whether it makes sense or not, this is going to be really expensive. So I think that should be the absolute maximum. Quite honestly, I think, just the product price divided by cost per click, this is also kind of a good reference. So, I think you shouldn't spend hundreds of dollars on a keyword to find out whether it's actually performing or not. Okay, does that make sense? So I know a lot of math here, but the advantage is very simple math, right? So I think that everyone should be able to do this. Now, I think that I want to point out is that the attribution is set to 7 days by default, right? So if a sale happens up to 7 days after someone clicked on the ad, then it's still calculated as sale, which is why when you look at those numbers, I suggest that you only look at data that is older than 7 days. So don't look at the data from the past week, only from the week before and the month before, right? Okay, cool. So that's how you should take X into account. So what should you do with your broad ad group and again, it's on an ongoing basis, right? So in the first part, we've seen how to set up the broad campaign, and now we want to look at how you can actually manage this broad campaign on an ongoing basis. So pretty similar to what you do in order, what you do in broad is you take some search terms out of it and put it to negative, and then you also move some search terms from broad to exact, right? That's the general strategy. So it's very similar to what you do in auto, in the auto campaign. So you move search terms to negative if they don't match your product, right? Or if they don't lead to any sales after X clicks. And we just saw how we calculated the X. And then you would also move them to exact if the search term does generate clicks within X and also has a relevant search volume. Okay. And I think that's also important. I wouldn't move every search term that does generate one sale into the exact ad group. I would only move those search terms that actually have a significant search volume. Because the thing is that if you move every search term that generated one sale, even though it might just get 10 impressions a month or so to the exact ad group, then you will have many search terms in exact, and that makes it hard to focus on the ones that are really relevant. So I again, for the sake of simplicity, I think you should only move those who actually also those who actually perform and create sales, but also those that have a significant search volume. Okay, and then again, like we said before, make sure to add the search term to negative in the broad ad group where you're taking it from, right? And then eventually you can also leave some search terms in broad ad group and only adjust the bids. If the search term has very little search volume, but is still relevant to your product, then you might want to increase the bid to see if you're getting any more impressions. And if you do, then you could move them to exact afterwards. Okay. So that's what I suggest how you do the broad, how you handle the broad ad group. Now, again, this is something that you can do on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So I don't think there is a huge need to go in there on a daily basis, but you should do it with, a certain frequency. So once a week or every second week. Okay. And so finally, and quite honestly, this is to me where the magic is happening. It's the exact ad group. So the auto campaign is essentially just to research new keywords, which you can then move to broad. The broad ad group is essentially to qualify and to identify the most relevant keywords and search terms. And then the goal is to actually have the most relevant search terms that are creating sales and then have a lot of search volume in exact. Okay. Because the advantage of exact is that you can actually create keyword specific bids, right? So if you look at what you can do in the exact match group, in the exact ad group, there are two things you can do. So first, you can move some search terms to negative exact. Note that this should not happen very often because the bad keywords are already filtered out in auto and broad campaigns. So it should only happen very rarely that you actually have search terms that don't match your product in your exact ad group. Okay. So the huge thing that you can do is you should work on your bids. Okay. And as you've seen before, we didn't talk about bidding so far too much, right? Because I think the main point of bidding is really in this exact ad group. Okay. This is where you should work on the bids. This is where you should really start bidding systematically. And I know that, setting bids is also quite a difficult thing where a lot of sellers are struggling. So I think that I showed you a good way how do you set the default bid, right? In some slides before. And now I want to show you how you can actually adjust the bids once you've set the default bids, right? So how you can adjust the bids on an ongoing basis. And I'm sorry again, I will need to go a bit into back to college in some way and show you some charts. But I think, again, the idea is not too hard to understand, but I think it's very valuable if you do understand this general concept. Okay, so let's look at let's start with how impressions, clicks, and the units you sell develop with the bid, right? So if you don't bid anything, if you set your bid to 0, I don't know if that's even possible, but theoretically, if you set your bid to 0, you won't get any impressions, right? Because you're not bidding anything, right? If you set your bid to 5 cents, you will get a few impressions. If you increase your bid to 25 cents, you will get more impressions, right? So the more you increase your bids, the more impressions you will get until you reach a certain point, okay? And that point is typically when you've reached the first position for your ads, right? So if you reach the first spot on the first page in terms of ads, it doesn't make any difference in terms of impressions. You won't get more impressions by bidding more, okay? Because there's just so much search volume on that keyword that if you already get all the search volume by being on number 1, then there's no huge difference by increasing those. You won't get more impressions by increasing the bids, okay? So that's important to understand that, it's not forever that you increase your bids and you will get more impressions, but it is hitting some ceiling here, and then that's just about it, and it doesn't make more sense to increase the bids, okay? And so assuming that the click-through rate and the conversion rate remains the same no matter what you bid, that also the same chart here goes for the clicks and for the units, okay? So that means that the more you bid, the more impressions you get, the more clicks you get, and also the more sales you generate, until you reach this point here where you're actually on the first page in the first ad spot. And then bidding more will not result in more sales because, you got the maximum out of it. Okay. So that's how impressions, clicks, and units develop with the bid. Okay. So the next question is, how does your profitability develop with the bids? And that's the purple line here. And that's, again, I think is fairly easy to understand. The more you bid, the less money you make on the product you sell, right? Because essentially, that essentially means your ACOS is increasing. So if you bid 10 cents, that means that you will only spend a limited amount on sponsored products. If you bid $1, then you might be losing money for each sale that you generate, because it's just you're spending more money on ads that you actually have in margin, right? So the profitability per unit, and that's really important to understand, the profitability per unit is decreasing as you increase the bids. And I think that just makes perfect sense, right? Now, the trade-off that you kind of have, and this is something that I think a lot of people often misunderstand, is that it's a trade-off between profitability and volume. Okay, obviously, a lot of people always say that the lower the ACoS, the better it is, but that's not actually true. It could be that you have a higher ACoS, so you have a lower margin per product, the profitability is lower, but your actual profit is higher because you just sell more units. Okay, so if you look at the total amount of profit, okay, that you generate, not the profitability. So the profitability is the profit that you make per product. Okay, whereas the profit is the profit that you make across all the products that you sell through sponsored products. Then you can see that the profit is typically developing like this, right? So the profit is increasing here, and then it reaches a tipping point, and then the total amount of profit is kind of decreasing again. Okay, and that's because the tipping point is when the profitability per product is decreasing at a higher rate that the impressions are increasing. Okay, so I guess that's a bit mathematical, but it's I don't know. I hope this is clear for you guys. If not, please let me know. But it's essentially the green line is kind of showing is the sum of of what you actually make, combining the profitability per product and at the same time the profits, the impressions that you generate. Okay, so that's the general way of how the bidding works. And now the question is, how do you adjust the bids, right? And the starting bid. So I just showed you before how to set the default bid. Okay, so you've set your default bid when you start your and you start your when you set up your campaign. So you start here with your default bid. Okay, and then so the goal for you is essentially to test different bids and to see which bid is actually leading to the desired point here on this chart. Okay, so there are 2 points that are important, right? The first point is this point here, because this is the point where you actually maximize profits. Okay, so that means that here somewhere, I don't know, a bid of maybe 40 or 42 is actually the bid that will maximize your profits. Okay, because the green line, the maximum of the green line, means that this is where you maximize your profits. Okay, and then the other point that is important is the point down here. You don't make any profits anymore. As you can see, profits are down to 0, but you generate a huge amount of sales. Okay, so if you want to maximize for profits, you're looking for this bid here. If you're maximizing for sales, you're looking for this bid here. Okay, and so if you start here, if this is your starting point, okay, so here we're somewhere around, let's say 30, right? So if you start here, what I suggest you do is, starting from the default bid, you move in incremental steps, okay, by 20 to 30% in either direction. Okay, so if you start here at your default bid, you can increase the bid by, let's say, 30%. Okay, so from 30 cent, you might increase it to 40 cent, and then you can test how this actually affects your overall profit. Okay, and if you see that your overall profit is increasing by moving from here to here, you can then again increase it for another 30%, okay? And then you will end up somewhere here, okay? And that will actually mean that you make less profit. So you will actually go back to the bid that you had before, so the 40 cent, and probably stay there, okay? But what's important is that you test this in incremental steps. That means that, because then you will the jump is too big and you don't make any conclusions. So I suggest you do incremental steps, meaning like 30% increase or decrease in the bid, and see how this affects your profit, right, or your sales. Okay, so I know this is looks like crazy math here, but again, I think the concept behind should be understandable. Okay, so I see that Chris has a question here. I can see the questions are getting less. So so I'm not sure. I think this is a bad sign. So people are probably not understanding. But yeah, so essentially, the question that Chris and also Nico have is, are you testing this for each keyword individually? Yes, you are, right? So this works for each keyword because each keyword has a different line here. Okay. So for each keyword, you test this. And again, you can do this on a bi-weekly basis or even, once per month. You just increase the bid by 30%. And then after 2 weeks, you'll go back and you see how this affected your performance. Did it generate more sales? Did it generate more profit or less profit? Okay. And depending if it generated more profit, great. Then again, you increase it by another 30% and you see if this second increase will actually generate more profits. And if you see that profits are declining because you're bidding too much, then you just go back to where you've been coming from.
And Umar is asking, is it our goal to find which bid results in higher profits?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the goal here for you in the bidding is to find the bid that is maximizing your profits. Okay, if that's your goal. Okay, if your goal is to maximize sales, without making any profits, then you want to find this bid here. Okay, but that's essentially the strategy, right? So the goal is to find either this one here or to find this one here, depending on your goal. So if you want to maximize profits, you want to find the intersection down here. If you want to maximize sales, you want to find the intersection down here.
And Nico is asking, so do you wait for X clicks to validate, right?
Yes. So that's essentially yes. That would be the approach, right?
Mm-hmm. And also, Michael is asking, how long per step in number of days should you wait to set up?
Yeah, so that's kind of the question that Nico was asking. So you could, I mean, there are two approaches. So one approach is to wait for a time period, right? Which is typically should be 2 weeks, depending on the search volume. The other one is to wait for X that we calculated before. This is what Nico is suggesting, and also what I suggest, right? So that you kind of have this X. And then I think that Kanad is also making a great comment here. The curve is dynamic. As it is affected by others selling bidding for the same search term. So yes, absolutely. I mean, this is a kind of a moving target, right? So depending on how other sellers are bidding, this is changing, which is why this is an ongoing thing, right? So it's a constant testing. You go up and down and kind of see how this evolves. Yeah. So Toby is asking, so how is that possible for multiple products and multiple keywords? Well, that's the thing, right? It is quite, it can be quite time consuming, which is why the general strategy that we offer, if we go back here, is really to only have the best performing and the ones with the highest search volume in this exact campaign here, because this is where the bidding really starts. Okay. So the idea is that you really have, you use this structure here to come up with the best search terms and the best keywords. You put those into exact and you start bidding on those that are really, really relevant. Okay. Because if you have hundreds or thousands of keywords here in exact, then you will spend your life changing bids. And that's, I assume, not what you have as a goal for your life, right? So that's how you do it. I mean, obviously, there are some tools coming up who automate that automate this process. But it's if you want to do it manually, I suggest that you really limit the number of search terms that you have in your exact ad group.
Okay, so let's move on. It's getting late. We still have questions.
Yes, let's move on. So, I mean, essentially, this is the end of the presentation of part one, right? So the next part would then be to show you how Selix can help you to actually manage those to manage those the campaigns. I don't know. Are you? So yeah, Casey is asking how TK Metrics offers a sponsor products optimizer, how Celix differ from them. So if that's okay for you, Augustus, I would move quickly into Celix, just a two-minute presentation. And then we can take on some further questions. So let me just hop here into Celix. This is the Celix interface. I hope that some of you are familiar with it. That would be a good sign for me. For those who don't, this is how it looks. As you can see, there are a wide range of things that you can do with Celix, right? So you can you have a cockpit, you can optimize your rankings, track reviews, spot on competitors. You have an inventory management feature. You have a profit calculation. You have sessions and conversion rates that you can analyze. So a wide range of things. But when it comes to sponsor products, we offer this PPC manager here. Let me just zoom in a little bit. So that's a PPC manager in Celix. And so the idea of the PPC manager is that you can actually manage your entire campaigns, right? So you don't need to do anything inside of Seller Central anymore, because you can do everything here in Celix. Okay. So first, what you see is all the numbers are updated and populated here for you, right? So you see revenue, cost, the ACOS, cost per click, but also impressions, click-through rate, clicks, and conversion rate. So those numbers are pulled automatically through the API. So you don't need to upload it or download it. All the numbers are right here. You can also do a side-by-side comparison of those numbers over time, right? So you can see how revenue developed versus cost, for instance, or how revenue developed versus impressions or versus click-through rate, right? So you have all those numbers here over time as well. Now, the interesting part is actually if you scroll down here to this table, you'll actually have a list of all your campaigns, and you can now actively optimize those campaigns, right? So again, for all campaigns, you have all those numbers here, right? So you can you have cost, revenue, ACOS, cost per click, impressions, click-through rate, clicks, conversion rate, and orders. So all the numbers that you would need to decide whether a campaign is performing or not, you have those right here. Now, when you click on an ad group, right? So let's say that you want to click on this auto campaign here. So you just click on this auto campaign. No keywords, but only search terms. So if you click here on this tab, search terms, it will actually show you all the relevant search terms that are in this auto campaign here. Okay, so I just see that there are no search terms in here. So let's go back to the overview section here. Oops. Right. So if we choose this campaign here, for instance, right, we can drill inside of this ad group. As you can see, you can change the bid right in here, right? So you can do literally everything that you would also be able to do in Seller Central. You can also change the status, right? So you can pause campaigns and ad groups. So really everything that there's no need to use Seller Central anymore. And so now you have all the keywords here, and again, you can change the bids here. You can research new keywords and add keywords directly here in Celix. We also have some smart filters where you can search for profitable keywords, unprofitable keywords. So if you wanna find keywords that didn't generate any conversions, you just click here on no conversions, and instantly it will show you the keywords that didn't generate any conversions so far, right? So that's very easy and very convenient to use. You can also move search terms around between campaigns. So this again also works very easily. So I think it's just it's a tool that simplifies a lot of the steps that you would need in a very manual process in Seller Central. Okay. Cool. So that's it for Celix. Let me just see if there are any more questions coming here.
Chris is asking, is it possible using your tools to find keywords competitors are ranking for, so that Chris can see comparison of him and versus the competitor?
You mean like a one-on-one comparison? I mean, yes, you can use Sonar for the reverse ASIN. And so in the side of the tool, there is no one-on-one comparison for how competitors are ranking. So it's only through Sonar.
Mm-hmm. And Casey wants to know your pricing strategy. He's asking what are these credits for under each monthly plan?
So the credits are used for specific actions that you take inside of Celix. So those are namely tracking products and tracking keywords. So the credits do not affect the PPC manager. If you take the smallest plan, which is the $50 plan, you can actually manage your entire sponsored products portfolio, no matter how many campaigns you have. Right. So this is all in inside of the smallest plan. You don't need any credits to manage your sponsored products campaigns.
Mm-hmm. And Femke wants to know, do you have any plan for one ASIN? She says that $50 is a bit too much, I think, for a not good selling product.
And unfortunately, so we don't have any plan lower than the $50 plan. I think that $50 is very fair compared to what you see in the market, specifically since it's not just the PPC manager, right? So let me show that again. So you have a ton of things here to analyze your profits, to analyze your performance, right? So I guess this is the only tool where you actually see sessions and conversion rates, right? So as you can see here, right, for the last, you can select any time frame. You can go for the last 30 days, and we will show you exactly your sessions, right? So you can see the yellow line, for instance, is the number of sessions that you received, and also the conversion rate, right? So those are things that are super powerful. You can also drill down on a product level and look at session and conversion rate on a product level. So I think there are some very, very powerful features in there. And so, I think that $50 is a very fair price, even though if you just have one ASIN.
And Natalia is asking, do you have any promo code?
Do we have any promo codes? So typically we don't rework with promo codes. I mean, if she can. I know. So, like I said, typically we don't work with any promo codes. Now, if you're really on the brink, what I can offer you is just an extended free trial. So if you want to give it a try for 30 days instead of 14 days, just send me an email, and I can extend your trial. I think is that a fair deal?
Yeah, I think so. Where can
maybe you can post. You can post a link to Celix, and then everyone who signs up just sign up through a regular website for the 14-day trial, and then send me an email, and I can extend your trial.
So what email they should use? They should use the email which they get. They just should reply what they get to their email.
I just posted my email, so it's fj@celix.com.
Mm-hmm, okay. All right. Maybe we should go through some questions before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there were a lot of questions. People are waiting for the answers.
Yeah, cool.
So, how somebody was asking, Jakob, how to improve the quality score on Bing ads? Is it what you can answer?
No, I'm sorry. I mean, Bing ads are really not related to the products on Amazon.
Next one, single keyword grouping or multiple keyword grouping?
I'm not entirely sure what the question is. Maybe Jacob can elaborate a bit on that question.
Yeah. Mark, if I exclude all keywords in a manual campaign, will Amazon dig deeper to receive new keywords?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's part of what I suggest. That you add when you move a. Let's go back here. When you move your search terms from auto to broad or from broad to exact, the thing that we recommend is that when you move it from broad to exact, you put it on negative here on broad, right? And so I think the question Mark has is, if you do this, will Amazon still try to find other keywords, other search terms, even though you put it on negative? And yes, we tested this, and Amazon is continuing. It doesn't impact the search for other search terms. Okay, so if you put Apple Slicer to negative exact on broad, Amazon will still show the ads for Apple Core, for instance, or Apple Core Slicer, or whatever it is, right? So it doesn't. There's no harm in putting those to negative.
Okay, next one. Another question from Mark. If I start two campaigns, match type broad or phrase, for the same ASIN and the same keywords, will Amazon generate different keywords if I would bid differently? For example, shoe €1 and other campaign 50 cents. Or will both campaigns cannibalize each other?
So the official statement from Amazon is that there is no cannibalization, right? So it's not that you're bidding against yourself. So I think that's generally very, very important. So yes, if you can do it like he says. So you can put the same keyword into broad and into phrase. I think there's no harm there. It just, I think the disadvantage is that you will actually split the performance onto those two match types. Okay, so you will have, let's say, 50% of the clicks and the conversions on your broad campaign, on your broad ad group, and 50% on your phrase ad group, and that makes it difficult to assess the performance, because the performance you will need to compare or aggregate the performance of the same search terms in two different ad groups. So this is why we don't recommend to split the same search terms across different ad groups.
Okay, thank you. Avon was asking, should your pricing be different for the manual versus the autumn campaigns?
Yes, so generally the auto campaign is the campaign where you have the least control over for which keywords this Amazon will display your ads, right? That means that Amazon will certainly display it for a lot of search terms that are not relevant for your keyword, for your product, okay? And so the goal should be to reduce this as much as you can. Okay, so you want a bid lower for your auto campaign. This is where you should have the lowest bid. You want to have a higher bid in broad, and you want to have the highest bid in exact. And the reason is that, in auto, Amazon is, the cast the net that Amazon casts is very wide here in auto, whereas in exact there is no waste. You just bid on exactly what you want to bid on. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I don't remember if this was answered, but it was a question about negative keywords. Should they be exact or phrase type?
Yeah, we answered that. We said negative exact.
Mm-hmm. Why choose auto campaign instead of broad campaign?
Great question. The advantage of the broad campaign is essentially that you can bid higher because you have more control over the keywords that it's showing up, right? So you can bid higher and therefore find more keywords and more search terms. Okay, that's a general idea. If you take it to the very extreme, what you can do also is you can just forget about the auto campaign and forget about the broad campaign. Just go into a keyword tool like Sonar or any other keyword list that you have. Take a list of 10,000 of keywords and then just put them into exact, right? I mean, that would be very extreme, but that's also something you could do. Then you wouldn't need to research keywords in auto and in broad, okay? To me, that's not the ideal strategy because then you have 10,000 of keywords that you need to manage here in exact, but this is something you could do.
Okay, thanks. I like your short answers. Femke was asking about order of the words. Is this has to do with broad, exact, or match right? I think I don't remember the content. I think it was about one of the slide where you presented all the
match types. Yeah, so it depends. So if you have the order is not relevant for broad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that? Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Toby was asking, how do you know that you need 20 clicks for one sale? It's
deducted on the organic conversion rate. So if you have an organic conversion rate of of 5%, right? That means out of every 100 clicks, you get 5 sales, right? And that means that for one sale, you need 20 clicks. Does that make sense? So it's of course it's an average, right? So if you have I guess that's the easiest way I can say it. So if you have a conversion rate of 5%, it means that you need 20 clicks on average to generate one sale.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Femke made clarification about her question. She was meaning the order of words for the phrase.
For phrase, so for phrase, I do think it matters. So it will, if you bid on Apple Slicer, it will only show it for search terms where Apple Slicer is actually included in the same order. So I do think it matters, but I'm not entirely sure.
Mm-hmm. Raul wants to know what should be the strategy if main keyword has very bad ACOS.
Well, essentially, lower the bid, right? I mean, that's you can do two things, right? You can try to improve the conversion rate, or you can try to lower your bids, right? So that's for one keyword. If the entire campaign has a negative ACOS, then you should go through your campaign, through your campaign, go through the search terms, and delete those search terms that are not relevant. Put them to negative. I think that's the biggest trigger. I think the biggest waste of money happens when people bid on too many keywords that are not relevant, right? So you have 1,000 keywords that are all eating like $10 a month, right? Even though they're not generating any sales and they're not relevant. So I think the key to having profitable campaigns is really on a regular basis, go through your ad groups, go through your search terms, and put those search terms to negative if they're no fit.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to switch off the screen sharing so people can still see your face?
Sure. Of course. Well, let me see how that works.
We still have quite a few questions on the list. Let's try to go quickly through them. Katerina was asking, if it is a new product and you don't have sales history yet, how do you estimate the clicks needed?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in this case, I would just take an average conversion rate, and I think that a good average conversion rate is somewhere around 10 to 15%. So in this case, I would just go with 10 to 15%. But the question is also, if you don't have any click history, if you don't have any sales history, do you already want to get started with sales, right? With PPC, or would you rather wait for a few organic sales?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Marcin wanted to know what should we do if our default bid is much lower than Amazon suggests?
Well, what will happen is, so I would still leave it there, the default bid, right? And then what will happen is gradually you will see that you don't get enough impressions and you will start to increase the bid until you end up with the suggested bid. But I think it's better to start at a lower level and then work your way up than starting on a very high level and then work your way down. Because I believe that eventually, if everyone has a strategy of starting very high, then the overall level will be very high. I think that's it's not in the interest of all sellers to start to bid like crazy, and that's what happens if everyone takes Amazon suggested bid. If everyone is always taking Amazon suggested bid, the suggested bid will always increase. And that's not something that you want. Okay, so I suggest to start lower and then work your way up.
All right. Sean wants to know, what do you think of using 20 best keywords based on impressions from the auto campaign for the manual campaign?
I think it's a great idea. I think it's not. I think it's missing a part because if you just look at impressions, then you certainly get the ones that have a high search volume, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your product is actually performing. Okay, so I think I would extend this by saying take the 20 best keywords based on impressions plus that are also relevant to your product, and ideally where you also generated a sale. And then I think it's a great strategy.
Nico was asking, when you move from one to other group, do you also add negative list in the group where you moved keywords from?
Yes, exactly. So that's core. It's a core part of the strategy.
Andrea wants to know, can't you simply pause the keyword in the broad campaign rather than negative exact?
So great question, great thought. Also, the problem is if you pause it, then you will pause it for all the search terms that it would be bidding on, right? So it will also pause it for Apple Corer and Apple Slicer Corer and all the other things. But so what our goal is to just explicitly avoid that it bids on the one that you just moved, right? So not all the search terms of this keyword, but just the one search term that you actually moved. Okay. So this is why it makes sense to put it to negative and not to pause it.
Pierre Michel was asking, do you have a coupon code? Okay, this is answered. Toby says, I think the biggest issue is how much to spend for PPC. One price will be changed every 2 weeks. How should we calculate? How should ACOS be calculated?
Well, again, if you change price every second week, you will need to calculate your ACOS again every second week. But to be fair, I don't think that this is such a big issue because calculating the target ACOS is, I think, fairly easy. Essentially, it's a margin, right? So.
And yeah, Casey wanted to know how Teikametrics tool is different from Selix. I think you answered this.
Yeah, it's I think the differences are not too big. I think we're kind of working towards the same goal of automating the campaign. So I think the biggest difference is right now is in terms of pricing. I think Teikametrics starts as $500 per month, whereas our highest plan is $400 per month, and our entry plan is $50. So I think
Okay. Elizabeth wanted to know if 10 pence, probably she's from UK, is a good starting point for bids.
Well, like I said, I think the starting bid there is no good starting bid per se, right? I'd suggest the starting bid should be your default bid, and the default bid is calculated based on let me go back to the slide. Essentially based on your target ACOS and your organic conversion rate. That's kind of the calculation. So there are slides. It's in the slides also. So maybe she can look at the replay.
Sure. Toby, how is that possible for multiple products and multiple keywords? Now, probably he's referring to that chart with a lot of graphs.
Like I said, it gets more and more work the more keywords you have and the more products you have, which is why we're big fans of keeping it simple. And I think I gave the answer already in the presentation. Is just try to reduce the amount of keywords that you put into exact. That's I think really focus on those keywords that drive a lot of traffic and that really convert well. Though that's I think the best I can say to this.
Could you track competitors' listings? Is there a mail notification for changes on listings? Would be amazing. Probably a question about your tool.
Yes, it's a question about Selix. So yes, it is possible to track competitors. So you see every move. Don't get email notifications yet, but it's a great point. Great idea.
And also, how do you track your changes in the campaigns and how they work for you? How to track if your change works well? There is no history for the changes of 100 keywords per week.
Yes, that's it's a very good question. I think that today the only option that you have is, if you want to do it manually, is to use Excel or some way to document it, right? So you would literally need to write down, today I changed the bid from 10 to 12, right? I think that so in Selix we're working on this change log. Essentially, I think it will go live for the next 3 to 4 weeks maybe, where you'll be able to track. So the tool will track automatically for you what you're changing and show you how this actually affects your performance.
Nico wanted to know, does Selix offer automated support for the exact workflow which you presented in the today? Like remembering previous
Yes.
results, increasing amount, wait for X clicks.
I mean, it's not fully automated in the sense of you push a button and then it all happens for you. But you can do it in a kind of a semi-automated way. So you can this moving of campaigns, this like moving, no, not moving on campaign, but moving search terms between the ad groups and putting search terms to negative and changing bits and all of that. That is all integrated in Selix, and it's very easy. So you just say, okay, take this search term and move it from this campaign to that campaign, and then it's moved for you. So that works, yes.
And Umar wants to know, when launching a product, are we supposed to launch both auto and manual at the same time, or we should give a week or two? I think you answered it.
Yeah, I don't see a reason why you should wait with the manual campaign, right? The only reason could be that you don't want to search the keywords, right? But like I showed, using Sonar, it's very easy to do. So I don't see any reason why you should not start right away with the manual campaign.
Also, Umar wants to know, when starting a manual campaign, is there a recommended number of keywords to start with?
Yeah, so like I showed on the slides, I think 20 to 50 is probably a good number. So I wouldn't go much higher than 50. Sometimes it's also enough to get started with 5. I think the goal should be to really cover the top keywords, those that are really important for your product, and you should know those keywords, right? So take those keywords, put them into Sonar, and find another 5 to 10 to 20 keywords that are also relevant, that have a high search volume. So I wouldn't go in Sonar and take thousands out of it. I would really start with the top 20 to maybe 50 search terms or keywords.
One of the last questions Eckhard was commenting very nice and exact way. Actually, I don't know exactly to which slide he's referring to, one of the last ones. I have 10 campaigns running due to the reason that Amazon stop and go with campaigns. Do you have the same experience?
I'm not exactly sure if I understand the question correctly.
Yeah, Eckhard, if you're still there, can you just clarify what you meant? Probably you were referring to one of the slides which we missed.
Okay.
Raul wants to know, how do I find out the order ID for anonymous review? It's not relevant to this presentation.
I mean, you can use Selix to do this, right? So in Selix, it will show you this. Manual, it's very tough, but it's also I don't think that this is related to PPC.
No. Okay, so Toby is referring to previous question you answered about 20 clicks. 20 clicks to get one sale is conversion. How did you find out the average conversion rate of 5%?
Well, if it's in Seller Central. So you go to Seller Central, you go to reports, and then you can download the report and see the organic conversion rate. So you can see the number of impressions that you get, and you can see how many orders those generated, and then you can just calculate it by yourself, right? So you calculate the organic conversion rate of your own product. I can't hear you, Augustus, anymore.
Okay, sorry. Femke wants to know, so per manual campaign, one ASIN and one keyword, right?
So per manual campaign, one ASIN, yes, but not one keyword. So, like I said, so you start with like 20 to 50 keywords, and then you let Amazon do the research, and then you pile on some more keywords. But one ASIN, yes.
Chris, what is the difference between auto and broad in match type? Why do we not choose phrase instead?
So the difference between, so first of all, auto is not kind of a match type, it's a campaign type, right? And so in auto, you don't have control, or the biggest difference between auto and manual campaigns is that you cannot set individual bids, right? So in an auto campaign, Amazon will set the bids for you, and will also choose the keywords that you are bidding on. Whereas in broad, you can both limit what keywords Amazon should show the ad for, and also the bid. So that's the reason why broad has some advantages over auto. Why don't we use phrase instead? Well, phrase, like I said before, is I don't see a big difference between phrase and broad. So you can do it, but I think that it adds too much complexity compared to the benefit that you get out of it. That's the reason that we generally suggest not to use phrase, but only auto. Broad. It's getting late.
Yeah, and the last question, how long would you wait after a new product has just been launched to start with PPC?
So I don't think that there is a good answer in the sense of wait for 10 days or so. I think it depends on how successful you launch a product. I think you should wait for PPC until the listing is fully optimized, and ideally until you have the first 3, 4, 5 reviews. And if that happens very quickly, I don't see a reason why you should wait. If you need 5 months to build this, then maybe you should start running PPC before. But generally, I think, launch your product, do your campaigns to generate the first reviews, and once the first reviews are there, you can get started.
Actually, there is another question which was the very first comment when we started the webinar, but I asked person to clarify as I don't see a question mark, but maybe you will understand what he wants to know. He says, I set up a PPC campaign. It ran for a few days and I came up when I searched the campaign keywords on the page 1 and down. However, one day the impressions dropped to 100, 200 a day, and I'm no longer coming up when I search the campaign keywords. What I do see is that I'm coming up on similar items.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. I mean, it's always hard to tell, if you don't know the circumstances. But one explanation could be, there are always two possible explanations. So one explanation is that you've changed something, and the other explanation is that a competitor or Amazon changed something, right? So if he didn't change anything, then it's likely that something happened either with competitors or with Amazon. So it could be that competitors are just bidding very high and increase their bids, or it could be that Amazon for some reason found that your listing is not relevant enough. So you got a lot of impressions, but you didn't get any clicks and any conversions. So Amazon eventually concluded that the product is not relevant enough to still be shown there, because it's not just about how much you bid on Amazon. It's also about how relevant this product actually is for that specific keyword.
Thanks, but I was like that there were last questions. There is one more, and I see Eckhart made a correction to his question, but I found one more question in another stream, YouTube stream. Azizur, he said first that Sonar is a really amazing tool, and since it's evening, his question is, how can you advertise adult products? It's evening in Germany.
Okay.
How can you advertise adult products? You don't see this question in the chat, but it's from the YouTube stream. How can you advertise adult products?
So how can you advertise adult products? I don't think that this is possible. Actually, I'm not entirely sure. I know that Amazon is very restrictive when it comes to adult products. So great category, first of all, but I don't think it's possible.
Okay, Eckhart, since he was before, I see one more question is coming, but if one of my campaigns ran good, then happened that after 7-10 days, they don't create any more conversion. Seems that Amazon stopped the campaign. I don't change the bids, and after 2 weeks, the campaign start again. What's that?
Well, again, it's very hard to tell, if just by looking at this. But it could be. So if he didn't change anything, that's very likely that someone else changed something. So it could be that a competitor had some very aggressive campaign that he was running during those 2 weeks. It could be that Amazon had some outages. It happens also sometimes that Amazon just for some reason doesn't show any ads. So it's very. It's very hard to tell from the outside, but I can tell you that the sponsor product system is not perfect. We all know that Amazon has some issues here and there, and so it's the same with sponsor products. So sometimes there are just some outages where, where it's a bit strange.
Okay. The last question just popped up from Leta. When I ran an auto campaign, a bunch of competitors' ASINs came up in my report. Do you know why? And guys, no more questions.
Yes, great question. So when an ASIN shows up in your auto campaign in the search term reports, that does not mean that someone searched for the ASIN, but instead it means that a user came from outside of Amazon, right? So they saw an ad on Facebook, for instance, they clicked on this product, and your ad was shown on the listing page, on the product detail page of that product. Okay. So that means that the click happened on the product detail page of that product of the ASIN that is shown. But it doesn't mean that someone searched for the ASIN. That doesn't happen. Nobody's searching for an ASIN because nobody who's not a seller doesn't know what an ASIN is, right? This is a very specific knowledge that we all have. So that's the reason why an ASIN is showing up in the search term reports. So I hope this makes sense.
Okay, thanks a lot, Franz, and people can still see link to go to Selix. You are welcome to open up your free trial and try Selix to see how powerful the tool is. And maybe you can just say in 2 sentences again what Selix is as a last sentence.
Sure. So, Selix is an all-in-one tool for Amazon sellers. So we help you to manage everything that's related to your Amazon activity, from profit tracking to keyword optimization, keyword research, and also obviously sponsor products optimization, right? So that's also the topic of this webinar. So yeah, that's Selix essentially.
And if you want to meet Franz, can you, in real life, can you just tell the next 2-3 conferences you will be attending?
So I'll be in the US next week. There's the Amazon's how's it called, Sellers Summit, I think. So it's in Fort Lauderdale. So I'll be there next week. If you're there by any chance, feel free to reach out to me. Then I'll be on a bunch of conferences in Germany. So there is the AMZ Con happening at the beginning of June. There are the Merchant Days also beginning of June. There is the Amazon Sales Congress happening in July, and some others. But I think
So actually, I will also be on a private label day. I'm in MZCon on 3rd of June. So if someone...
cool.
All right. Thanks a lot, Franz. It's almost 2 hours. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's my pleasure. So I think it's a complex topic, right? And I don't know. I hope it was clear for the people. I hope it's not too much in too little time. So if you have any feedback, feel free to share it.
Yeah, in my opinion, it was very strong presentation, and even Michael, who was very skeptical at the beginning, he was asking if it will be just Selix promotion. He stayed until now. He says
that's good.
Yeah, and people say.
That's probably the best compliment you can get, right?
Yeah. And people say, thanks, Franz. Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Really great info today. Happy with Selix. Looking forward to learning more. Excellent presentation.
Cool.
And yes, there will be a replay. Someone is
very kind.
All right.
Yeah. So thanks for sticking around for 2 hours. And then if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Bye-bye.